fasting, the act of moving fast on a device such as, better go faster, rollerblades. Hey Access, sorry I couldn't help myself but to start the video off something cheesy for you, so there you go. But if you couldn't already guess it, today's spiritual discipline that we'll be walking through is the spiritual discipline of fasting. And fasting is an interesting spiritual discipline to me because it's one that we don't talk about or do as often as some of the others. And I think one of the misconceptions about fasting is that it's only for the Old Testament. Back then it made sense, but today it doesn't make as much sense. But I really think that's untrue. And as we look in the Bible, we see examples of fasting in both the Old and New Testament. And I think it's something that we can put into our toolbox, and it's a spiritual discipline that can actually help us to grow much closer to God. And so we see examples in the Old Testament of Moses fasting before he receives the 10 Commandments from God. We see Daniel doing what we call the Daniel fast, where he eats only vegetables and water whenever he's under the thumb of King Nebuchadnezzar. And finally, we see Jesus in the New Testament fasting for 40 days from food and water when he's in the desert before he's tempted by Satan and defeats that temptation. So we see examples in both, and I think it's something that we can apply today in our lives. And so today we're going to break it down into 3 parts. Part 1 is why fast, part 2 is when to fast, and part 3 is how to fast. So starting with why. And if you think back to the lesson that we did on silence and solitude, we talked about removing noise from our life and creating a space to be able to hear from God in the silence and solitude. And so fasting is similar in that we're going to create some space in our life to be able to allow God to work and be able to hear directly from God in our time of fasting. And so fasting, we may create space by skipping a meal or by not eating for a full day or something like this, right? And so in that time, we're creating this space. We're inviting God to come in and speak to us and to be able to work in our lives. Secondly, we see fasting can be used as a tool of witnessing. And so we see this in Daniel, where Daniel is eating only vegetables and water, which is actually counterintuitive to what the king and his servants were thinking they needed to do. And so the king said, give Daniel the choice meats and the choice wine, and then he'll be big and strong and mentally ready to go. And what Daniel said is actually, no, it's not the food that sustains me, but it's my God that sustains me. So feed me vegetables only and water only, and I will look better, and I will be more mentally capable than the equivalent servants if I just receive those vegetables and water and allow God to work in my life. And it came true. And so that was sort of a tool that David used to actually witness to King Nebuchadnezzar and those around him. So kind of cool. So that's the why fast, to be able to create space, to allow God to work in our lives, and to be able to use it as a tool of witnessing, kind of depending on what we're doing the fast for. Number 2 is when. And so when, there's a bunch of different times that it makes sense to fast. So one of those is kind of when we do it corporately. And so in our church, we fast once a year at the beginning of the year, and we do what's called a Daniel fast. And during this time, it's the whole church together combining and doing this fast for 1 week, where we cut out meats, we cut out cheese, we cut out caffeine, we cut out alcohol, we cut out all of these extra things that are out of our lives, and we mimic the fast that Daniel did. And in that time, we're praying for God to do big things in our church that year, and it's a way to start off the year, the new year, on the right step and being aligned with God's will for our church and our lives. So that's a corporate fast. Another one is if we have a big decision in our life. So maybe we're trying to decide to purchase a new home or to move somewhere, or maybe we're thinking about taking a new job or career. And so fasting and asking God for wisdom in making that decision. Third, we may be petitioning God for something. So maybe there's an illness in our family or our friends that we're asking God to heal that illness. Maybe we're asking God for a job because we've lost our job. Or maybe we're single and we're looking for a spouse, or maybe we're struggling with infertility and we're asking God to intervene and to give us fertility to be able to have a baby. Whatever the case may be, if you can cut something out of your life and invite God in to work through that petition, it gives you a chance to rely on God rather than yourself, which is something I think is really tough for us, especially in America, just to be able to let go and say, God, you're in control of this petition. I trust in you. Here you go. Present that to him. And finally, another reason or a when to fast is maybe you want to check a bad habit that's in your life. And I know Katie does this a lot, where she will fast from social media. And so we get addicted to social media, especially on our phones. And so to be able to put that phone aside, to check that bad habit, and then to be able to replace it with a better habit, hopefully is something that we can do moving forward. So that's just a few examples of when we can and should fast. And finally, the how of fasting. And this is probably the most important, not just for fasting, but for all of the spiritual disciplines. I think back to the lesson that Kason gave on reading our Bibles. Reading our Bible is not just checking the box to be able to say that, yes, I read my Bible, or yes, I did my fast, but it's, are we doing it with the right heart, with the right intentions? And so Jesus speaks very specifically to the how, or to like the way we should fast in Matthew chapter 6, verse 16 through 18, when he says, "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." And so really the key here is fasting is not something that we need to go and we need to boast about and say, look at me, I'm fasting. But it's really, God's looking at our heart behind our fast. And if we're genuine in our fast and we're humble in our fast, God will come and he will work. He will give you what you're asking for, whether that's wisdom or an answer to a difficult decision that you're facing, or you're petitioning for something. God will come in and work if we create that space and we do it with the right heart and the right mindset. And so as with all the spiritual disciplines, take the next step. If you've never fasted before, fast one meal. And during that meal, spend that time praying or reading your Bible, or doing both. And just ask God to work in your life. If fasting is something you've done before, take that next step, whatever that may be for you. And I look forward to seeing you all this coming Tuesday on our Zoom call. And we're going to be talking about fasting together, and looking forward to that. So I miss you guys, and that's all I got for you today. So bye-bye.